Okay, let's start without them. They're latecomers, and you've heard them already. But we brought up a couple of new guys here today on stage for a talk on from where will we get the food in the future. And I set a question mark, nature, someone? Is that so? Because when we listen to the people in the first session here, it feels kind of like we won't get so much food from nature in the future. We will get it from somewhere else, right? And Pasi, let me start by asking you then, when you take a look at the food system a couple of decades from now, is it nature that's going to produce the food, or is it solutions like solar that's going to provide us with the food we need?
Well, for sure, we need something that is fundamentally more efficient if we want to continue like this. So, and with the population growth and so on, so the conflict is so large, we need something fundamental, in my view. But let's see, there are interesting many options, and I guess these conflicts then bring new opportunities and options viable. But about the nature, I mean, still the cell is the machine there, so it is natural. How you grow that then can be a different story and disintegrate from the land use. So I guess all more or less use the natural cells in different forms.
Okay, it's just natural cells in different forms. Erin, come, take a seat, take a seat. So everyone is networking so intense, so you're all... Brad, I see here, he's coming here with giant steps towards this stage. And Sheer, where are you? We're almost complete in the panel. Brad, take a seat. So from nature, yes, but Anton, you're with Urban Oasis. You're growing a lot of stuff in these vertical farms. Do you think we will produce a lot of stuff in the vertical farms going forward?
Yes, definitely. We have a farm in Liljeholmen, just not so far away, and we grow mushrooms and greens. And our belief is that we need to bring food production into the inner city. There's so many available spaces in our cities that are not being used and will be left available. And if we can bring food production closer to the people, this will have huge impact on sustainability, taste, nutritional value. And the key is just to get started, to test, to iterate, and get as much food production into inner cities as possible.
Okay, but that's not nature, right, the way we think it. It's a city.
Well, I mean, my philosophy is that everything that is produced by humans is also nature, because we are nature. And so we shouldn't create this separation and opposition between food that is made through technology and food that is made through the soil. There are many benefits to actually growing food without soil. No pesticides, cleaner environment, and most importantly, we can actually reduce the delivery time. And that delivery time is the thing that has the most effect on quality, nutritional value. And so, yeah, there's many advantages, and ultimately we are all nature.
You can also question whether the current food system is natural and from nature. So I disagree there.
Okay.
It would be from nature.
Of course. But Erin, let's back to a question. You seemed a little skeptical when you had your talk regarding where we are in this process of moving towards cell-based agriculture. So how far into the future? Because we're used to different timescales when you come from tech and when you come from food, right?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think it's any secret. I'm probably a little bit more conservative in my view on when these products will hit the market. And I'm going to have to give you the same answer as I gave you last year, which is that we don't make predictions as to when they'll be available because we just don't know. And that's the thing is when you're doing the science is you have to be not afraid of saying when you don't know. We're working on the answer, but I wouldn't give a specific timeline.
Sure. Do you agree? No. So when we will see the super meat in our stores here in Sweden?
Well, while I do agree on the basic idea that it's hard to tell and you never know what you don't know. According to where we are in our research stage, we do believe that we will be at the market in the very near future. In terms of how long exactly, roughly a few years. It's hard to tell, but I believe that we will see a world where clean meat is an option for everyone within the next 5 to 10, maybe 20 years tops.
But it's not more than 5 to 10 years before we see a lot of those products.
I believe it's not a lot more than that. It will be in that.
5 to 10 years, okay. It's interesting. That's kind of a short period of time when you talk about food, right?
It is, but at the same time, cellular agriculture has been around for quite some time. It has been getting more and more buzz lately, so people hear about it more, so they think it's a new idea. But the research has been going around for quite some time now.
Okay, Brad, you're working with both the cell ag and the plant-based meat alternatives. How would you say that we're going to go to the market with these types of products?
Well, one thing I would say is that when technology is developing, it follows an S curve, meaning when it's first developed, it's slow growth, and then suddenly there's that inflection point, and the growth just goes through the roof. And I would point out that the Wright brothers flew it first in 1903. We are about 15 years now from the first time cellular agriculture produced a clean meat. 15 years after the Wright brothers developed the plane, the planes were still made of wood. They were biplanes. They were slow. 20 years after that, we had jet engines. 20 years after that, we had monoplanes, and then 20 years after that, we had jet engines, and now I just got to fly in the Boeing 787. Spectacular experience, if you ever get to fly one. The technology is going to grow so fast. We're at that inflection point, and I truly believe this, that we are going to see this accelerate in a way that currently we may not even be able to imagine all the possibilities.
Okay, that's kind of an interesting. So you also say that between 5 to 10 years from now, the world will look totally different than today when it comes to where we grow the food. And
absolutely. The iPhone came 10 years ago, and now we can't imagine living our lives without phones in our pockets. So
it's really the technology pace the food world is entering into.
Absolutely, I think so, yes.
Okay, very interesting. Minna, so you're with the Marine Stewardship Council. I guess, to make sure that all the seas are in a good shape and we don't overfish the oceans. Are you longing for the day when the fish can, swim freely and without getting caught?
Or being grown in a lab. Sorry. Hi. I have to start by joining Nicholas, the first, who said, he had an apology to make. So I've never felt as much as like a fish out of sea. I'm not a foodie or a techie. I actually represent a sector which is quite conventional and quite slow. I mean, yes, nature can replace itself, but it takes a long time and it needs help. So it can be 20 years on before you see something recapturing. So what we do actually, what we offer is basically we want to keep it wild. So I'm not saying it's a contradiction because we've seen that capture fisheries is stagnated and aquaculture is kind of surpassing that. So of course, and we've heard a lot, but I think what surprised me in this context, we talk a lot about innovation. It's either kind of plant replacing meat, but what happened with all the white protein in the middle? So I don't know whether you'll be talking about, cultivating fish in the future. So I'm definitely open for ideas, but I think the main thing what we offer is that it's sustainable to the consumer, but also traceable. And I think we really need to know where our food comes, whether it's wild caught, farmed, or grown in a lab. So traceability, I think, is key.
And you're doing a lot of blockchain experiments at MSC?
Well, as I said, it's what we do with. I think our value is that we've got everybody in the supply chain from the capture fisheries to the end consumer engaged, and that's kind of a fantastic platform to start with. So we are having different pilots, whether it's using blockchain technology or other types of technology in future. But I think what interesting point, talking also about food waste, what people don't think about, there's a lot of waste before it actually enters or being pulled up in the nets, and that's obviously the discard. And there, technology can do a lot in terms of there are innovated like safety net from the UK that actually using light frequency technology to do size and species selectivity, so you can avoid 90% of the bycatch as discard.
So how much of the catch today is really traced and or authorized as an MSC fish?
Yeah, so we have two standards. So in terms of the capture fishery, what's taken out of the sea globally, about 10 to 12% is certified as sustainable. Then you have the chain of custody, but there's a huge leakage because the chain of custody is broken. So what we want to do in the end, of course, we want to safeguard fish for the future, but is really providing that traceability to consumer. And the chain of custody is broken along the way. And I think for an eco-label to be relevant also in the future, yeah, you have to, because there is a cost involved, and you have to reduce those. And a lot of it, we're talking about chain of custody not being digitalized in the sense that you actually physically have to have an auditor because you don't trust it to come and do that independently. So I think there's lots of gain. So I would say probably just 10% of the actual certifier is actually sold as MSC in terms of being fully traceable.
Ah, really interesting. So, and which is kind of a shame, because if you can get all the data out there, probably the ones catching the MSC certified fish could get a better price for their fish, right? And
well, I think if you talk about who's going to benefit from this, I think that's different kind of levels. But if you can actually minimize a lot of those transaction costs and have a blockchain that's verifiable, I don't know, maybe we have to have a third-party scheme verifying what goes into that. But that would significantly reduce cost. And ultimately, it's the industry and also the capture business that actually pays this cost. So if we want to have that in the future, we need to make it, more standardized, simplified, cost-efficient.
And Tim, you're from Oxfam. I mean, like, you're not dealing with food the way most of these other peoples are with producing it. You're distributing it or making people self-sustain, I guess.
Well, we're working obviously with farmers around the world who are actually producing the food, and I think it's worth remembering that the vast majority of farmers on the world are small scale. We're talking about 1.5 billion people around the world farming between 1 and 3 hectares, and they're producing the majority of the food in the world. They don't come to conferences like this, but it's clear that the food market in advanced economies is ripe for disruption. And I guess the question that we have is, who are going to be the winners, who will be the losers from that kind of disruption? And in particular, what does it mean for the people that are currently producing food at that scale, including not just food for local markets, but including the food that we're eating here, growing your bananas, producing the coffee, producing the cocoa that goes into your chocolate bar, growing your shrimp in Southeast Asia, etc. So these people need to be at the forefront of our thoughts as well. Yes, we should think about the consumers, about cutting out food waste. Yes, we should think about the nutrition for the consumer. But what about the people currently producing the food? And some of the technologies that we've heard about, I think, can have huge benefits for those people, to the extent that we are looking to replace demand for land-intensive commodities, in particular feedstocks for meat, then that's hugely beneficial to people that need land in developing countries. But others are more worrying, and I have some concerns when I think you pointed to the quote from Tyson Foods as kind of a good thing. This suggests that we can really take this thing to scale, but it also suggests that the big corporate food actors are likely to capture and dominate this revolution in the way that we produce food, and that can have really worrying consequences for small food producers. It suggests that they may just get cut out entirely as companies move to even more efficient, even lower cost ways of producing food, from aquaponics or automated farming and so on. So, I think we need to have a slightly more inclusive vision of the future of the food system that includes the people producing food at the moment, and make sure that they're also front and center, and they're not the losers from this disruption.
Okay, so we will produce food in nature with a lot of smallholders out there, and we will produce new types of food, and then in the big tanks and the new funky food systems out there. But who do you think will be the winners and losers? Very rapidly here, we'll start with you, Shri.
I think when it comes to clean meat, if I have to choose who will be the losers, it might be the vegans having their title taken away, since most vegans went vegan for the ethical issues, and now they can go back to eating meat. So it's a major identity crisis for a lot of them when they hear of clean meat.
Okay, so vegans are the losers. Brad, do you think so?
Well, from a Good Food Institute standpoint, we like to talk about the 4 different issues that we're addressing. One being the environment, one being health issues, human health issues, one being animal welfare, and one being poverty. And when you look at the number of calories that have to go into an animal to produce just a single calorie that a human would then eat, it tends to take away food from people that really need it on the lower end of the income spectrum. So we believe that they will actually ultimately be winners. anytime you're working on a transformation in the economy, some people are going to be uncomfortable with the change. And one of the things that we want to do as the Good Food Institute is make sure that this transformation happens as compassionately as possible and be as inclusive as possible. So are there losers? I hope not, to be honest.
We are only winners, right?
We will all eventually win from this transformation that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you very much. Erin, are we all winners?
That would be nice, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope that truth is not the loser. And I just hope that we don't fall into like an ends justify the means type of thinking in cellular agriculture, where because we're so well intentioned and there's so much promise of environmental and health and other kinds of benefits, that just it's not done thoughtfully and carefully. And I think there's this big rush to like quote unquote save the world, and yeah, we all want to save the world, but we also want to do it ethically and not lose sight of things like being honest and truthful.
Okay, so we need to shape up, and yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, a big hand for Erin. Pasi.
I really don't have anything to add what just Brad said. I hope and I assume that the man will be the winner and should be the winner. You were asking around a lot when we started this panel, that basically the time question, that when. And to a researcher you can ask two hard questions. The first is, are you sure? And the second is when, and the rest is a lot easier. So I believe that we need to go through some kind of conflict, whether it has to do with extreme climate or something like that, and there will be a new space or new kind of opportunities. Some aspects are just not accepted anymore.
Okay.
So through a conflict, and man will be the winner.
Okay, man is the winner. Short answer, Minna.
Well, we all want winners. We all want win-win solutions, but I think we have to be realistic. And I think putting in perspective, like when you say, okay, for example, today's farmer will be the clean meat farmers of tomorrow. I think there's also an identity and culturally attached. So I've worked a lot in the field trying to get fishermen to uptake, let's grow aloe vera or do something that it's not their way of life. So there is that, but that is no excuse. We have to evolve, and somebody has to take the lead. So we shouldn't just be going back and saying, no, it's because there'll be digital and technical inequalities in the world. That's not an excuse. We still have to lead the way.
Okay, thank you. Anton.
My answer is simple. The winners will be the ones that disrupt the supply chain and cut out the middlemen and can really build partnerships between the city and then all of the different ways of growing outside of the city.
Okay, thank you. Tim.
Well, I think it's still very much up for grabs, and that's why we have to debate it rigorously. And I think we do have to be a bit careful about this assumption that it's all win-win and mother and apple pie and everyone's going to benefit. Of course, there can be huge benefits, but let's debate it robustly. Let's look at who the losers can be as well, and make sure that the governance arrangements are in place, that the losers are not the poorest and the most vulnerable in the current system.
Okay. Thank you very much, panel.